My name is Margaret, and at 71 years old, I finally learned the hardest lesson of my life. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we love unconditionally. It started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I picked up my phone to call my son Daniel about his upcoming wedding plans. That's when my daughter-in-law Sarah looked me straight in the eye with a smile that froze my blood and said, "Oh, we actually got married yesterday. It was intimate. We only invited the people who truly matter to us." Those words hit like a punch to the gut. People who truly matter. For 3 solid years, I'd been paying their $500 monthly rent. I'd furnished every room in their apartment. I'd filled their refrigerator when their cupboards were bare. And apparently, I didn't matter enough to witness my only son's wedding. I stood there in my own living room, phone trembling in my hand, watching Daniel avoid my eyes while Sarah made herself comfortable on the couch I'd bought them. Hanging in my closet was a pale blue dress I'd carefully chosen for the occasion, $200 spent imagining myself in their wedding photos. Photos I would never appear in for weeks I'd been planning. I'd set aside $1,000 as a wedding gift. I'd called my sister Patricia in Seattle with the exciting news. I'd deep cleaned my entire house thinking they might celebrate with me afterward. All of it collapsed in those few poisonous words. People who truly matter. Daniel finally spoke, his voice rehearsed and hollow. "Mom, it was just us and the witnesses. Very small, very intimate, but I knew the truth. I saw it all on social media later. Sarah's parents beaming beside the bride and groom. Her siblings raising champagne glasses in celebration. Sarah's white dress, the one I'd unknowingly helped pay for with the $800 I'd given her the month before for personal expenses. 1 week later, exactly. 7 days after that humiliation, Sarah called me. Her voice had transformed completely. Gone was the confident woman who'd excluded me from her wedding. Now she sounded desperate, almost panicked. "Margaret, the rent's overdue. The landlord is threatening eviction if we don't pay this week. You forgot to transfer the money." I sat in silence, remembering all those times I'd rushed to make that transfer. All the times I'd canceled my own plans to ensure they had a roof over their heads. All the times I'd eaten rice and beans so I could fund their lifestyle. And now, after excluding me from the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call as if nothing had happened. "Sarah," I said with a calmness that surprised even me, "didn't I tell you? I only help people who truly matter." The silence on the other end was so profound I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. For the first time in years, it wasn't me who was trembling, it was her. "Margaret, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always mattered to you. I'm like a second daughter to you." Lies. All carefully wrapped lies. The same sweet voice she used whenever she needed something. The voice she'd used to ask for money for the wedding dress, the honeymoon, the rings, all of which I'd helped finance without knowing I'd never see them used. For years, I'd felt like I was walking on eggshells, weighing every word and gesture, hoping to receive even a crumb of genuine affection from my own son. I'd been the perfect mother, the accommodating mother-in-law, the silent provider who never complained when they treated me like I was invisible. But those words, people who truly matter, awakened something in me that had been dormant far too long. That night, I sat down and calculated exactly how much I'd spent on them over 3 years. Between rent, groceries, gifts, emergencies, and their various whims, the total came to over $20,000. $20,000 taken from my retirement savings, from the money my late husband left so I could live my final years in peace. And what did I get in return? Being treated like a stranger at my own son's wedding. I cried that night, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of accumulated frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for the foolish mother I'd been, for the woman who'd lost herself trying to be indispensable to people who considered her disposable. When I woke the next morning, something inside me had fundamentally changed. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, same tired eyes, same wrinkles telling stories of years giving love without receiving it in return. But there was something new in my gaze, a hardness I didn't recognize, a determination that had been buried under years of compliance. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table where I'd so often planned surprises for them, counted bills for their expenses, cried silently when they treated me with indifference. Now this table would witness something completely different. I pulled out my checkbook and bank statements. I wanted to see the full extent of my own foolishness in exact numbers. Monthly rent, $500 times 36. Months equals $18,000, groceries and supplies, roughly $200 monthly, another $7,200 birthday gifts, Christmas presents, anniversary gifts, at least $3,000. Sarah's medical emergencies, $800, the car loan they never repaid, $2,500. Their air conditioner repair, $600, living room furniture, $1,200. The total? $33,400, $33,400 wasted from my husband's inheritance, from my pension, from savings I'd accumulated penny by penny through decades of honest work. All thrown away to keep two capable adults comfortable, adults who couldn't even pretend to respect me. My phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. Normally my heart would race as I rushed to answer, hoping for an apology, an explanation. This time I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Finally, silence. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Sarah this time. I let it ring through as well. Then a text from Daniel. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. I deleted it without responding. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk. Not for any specific purpose, not for an errand related to them. For the first time in months, I walked simply because I wanted to. I passed the park where I'd taken Daniel as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who hugged me tight and said I was the best mom in the world. When had he become this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When had I started believing I had to buy my own son's affection? At the bank where I'd made so many automatic transfers, I stopped at the entrance. The branch manager, Mr. Anderson, saw me through the glass and waved. He'd processed every single transfer to Daniel and Sarah. Watched my account drain month after month to fill theirs. I walked straight to his office. Mr. Anderson, I need to cancel all the automatic transfers I have set up. He looked surprised. For 3 years, these transfers had been as regular as clockwork. Are you certain, Mrs. Thompson? Has something happened? His concern was genuine, more genuine than any interest Daniel had shown in me recently. What happened is that I finally opened my eyes, I replied. I want to cancel everything. And I also need information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money. While Mr. Anderson processed the cancellations, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Daniel, Sarah, Daniel again. It was as if they had radar for detecting when their income source was in danger. I turned the phone off completely. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Anderson said as he handed me the paperwork. Forgive me for overstepping, but in all these years, I've watched you be extraordinarily generous with your family. I hope you're not being pressured to make these changes. His words touched me deeply. This man, who barely knew me beyond banking transactions, showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son. I'm not being pressured. Mr. Anderson, on the contrary, I've finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, I felt strangely weightless, as if I'd left an enormous burden in that office. For the first time in years, my money was entirely mine. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource rather than a person. I thought about all the things I hadn't done because of them. The trips I'd postponed to save money for their needs. The friends I'd drifted away from because I was always available for their emergencies. The hobbies I'd abandoned because every dollar I spent on myself was one less dollar for them. When I arrived home, I found 3 cars parked outside my door. Daniel's, Sarah's, and one I didn't recognize. Through the windows, I could see movement inside my house. My blood ran cold. They had keys. Keys I'd given them because I trusted them, because I thought they would one day care for me as I'd cared for them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. Inside, I found a scene I'll never forget. Daniel sat on my couch with his head in his hands. Sarah paced like a caged animal. An older man I didn't know was rifling through papers on my dining room table. My papers, my personal documents, what is going on here? I demanded, my voice louder than I expected. All 3 looked at me as if I were the intruder in my own home. Sarah spoke first, that desperate urgency back in her voice. Margaret, thank God, we need to talk. This is Mr. Foster from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My situation? The question came out eerily calm. What situation? I'm doing perfectly fine. Daniel finally lifted his head, those eyes that once belonged to an innocent child, now reflecting only financial panic. Mom, we went to the bank. They said you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Anderson said you blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why. Mr. Foster, a man in his 50s wearing a gray suit and an insincere smile, approached with an outstretched hand. Mrs. Thompson, I'm Otto. I am not confused, I said with a firmness that silenced everyone. I'm clearer than I've been in years, and you're all going to leave my house right now, Attorney Foster interjected with that professional voice lawyers use when they want to sound reasonable. Mrs. Thompson, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They've documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? The laugh that escaped my throat was hoarse, almost cruel. Like what? Deciding my money belongs to me? Deciding not to finance the lives of two adults who treat me like garbage? Sarah jumped up as if I'd slapped her. We never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us eventually anyway. We're just expediting the process. There it was, the naked truth. Everything I had would belong to them one day. In their minds, I was already dead. They were just collecting their inheritance early. It didn't matter if I had 70 years left or 70 days. To them, I was just an ATM with legs that had become problematic. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All three of you, get out of my house. Daniel stood with that angry, childlike expression he made when he didn't get his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, car payments, the credit card you co-signed. You can't just cut us off overnight. I can't? My voice rose for the first time in the entire conversation. Who says I can't? For years, I've paid rent on an apartment that isn't even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Foster pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table. Mrs. Thompson, we've prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Daniel and Sarah to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary, until you feel better. I picked up the folder and, without even opening it, threw it directly into the trash. The only transition happening here is yours, to the front door. Sarah started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of contained rage. You can't do this to us, Margaret. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things, took on obligations because we knew we could count on you. Obligations based on my money, I replied. Not on my well-being, not my happiness, not my company. Just my money. And now that I've decided my money is better used on my own life, suddenly I'm a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. Daniel tried to approach, but I stepped back. He was no longer the boy who ran into my arms during nightmares. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle between himself and a comfortable life financed by others. Mom, we made mistakes, he said in a voice meant to sound remorseful. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Sarah was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you'd just be reasonable. Reasonable? The word tasted bitter. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger? Pretending it doesn't hurt that I was excluded from the most important day of my only son's life? Mr. Foster packed his papers with the efficiency of someone used to rejected proposals. Mrs. Thompson, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If you're indeed making irrational decisions due to mental health problems, a judge can determine you need guardianship. His words landed like a blow. This wasn't just a manipulative family visit. It was a real legal threat. Mr. Foster, I said, looking him directly in the eyes. I suggest you do your research thoroughly before threatening a 71-year-old woman who's managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who raised her son alone after her husband's death, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who until last week financially supported two completely capable adults. Sarah stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally revealed her true face. This won't end here, Margaret. We have rights. Lawyers too. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the lawyers you want, with your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums. The three of them walked to the door with the wounded dignity of people unaccustomed to being told no. Before leaving, Daniel turned one last time. Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You'll end up alone with no one to take care of you when you really need it. Daniel, I said with deep sadness but crystalline clarity, I'm already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not your neglect. As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room surrounded by the most beautiful silence I'd heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night I couldn't sleep, not from sadness or regret, but from adrenaline. I'd reclaimed control of my own life. I lay awake planning my next steps like a general preparing for battle. If Daniel and Sarah wanted to fight, I'd give them a war. But it would be fought with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 the next morning, I was dressed and ready. My first stop was Attorney Harrison Weber's office. I'd met him years ago handling my husband's estate. Unlike the attorney Daniel and Sarah had brought, Mr. Weber had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting elder rights. "Mrs. Thompson," he said after I explained everything, "what your children attempted yesterday is more common than you'd think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation." His words both calmed and worried me. They confirmed I wasn't crazy. What had happened was truly abusive. But they also made me realize the situation was more serious than I'd thought. "We need to document everything," Mr. Weber continued. "Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We'll also change your will to protect your assets from future manipulation." We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Weber whistled when he saw the total. $33,400 in 3 years. "Mrs. Thompson, with this money you could have lived comfortably, traveled, enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding." When I left his office, I had a complete plan. First, change all my locks. Second, install a security system with cameras. Third, open a new account at a different bank where they had no connections. Fourth, start living the life I'd postponed for years. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Chen, had known me for years because I was always buying things to fix Daniel and Sarah's apartment. "Mrs. Thompson, what brings you here today?" "Another emergency with your son?" "No, Mr. Chen. This time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want the best quality available." He looked surprised but asked no questions. While I chose the locks, his son Eric, who installed security systems, stopped by. It felt like Providence. "Eric," I said, "I also need surveillance cameras installed. The complete system. Price isn't an issue." While they prepared everything for installation the next day, I received a call from an unknown number. Sarah, calling from someone else's phone since I'd blocked her number. "Margaret, it's Sarah. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults." "Talk," I said flatly. "Listen, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Daniel and I have discussed it, and we want to make it up to you. How about a special dinner to celebrate our marriage with you? We could do it at your house, cook together like we used to." The manipulation in her words was so transparent, I almost laughed. "Sarah, how much rent do you owe exactly?" The silence confirmed I'd struck a nerve. Well, it's 2 months. $1,000 total. But I'm not just calling about that, Margaret. We really miss you. Do you miss me or my money?" "Both," she replied with surprising honesty. "Margaret, I won't lie. Yes, we need your financial help, but we love you too. You're important to us." "If I'm so important, why wasn't I important enough to attend your wedding? Why am I not important enough to receive a call that doesn't ask for money? When was the last time you called just to ask how I was doing?" Silence. We both knew the answer. Never. "Sarah, I'm only going to explain this once. For 3 years, you've treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me, ignored me, humiliated me, and finally you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the money's running out, you suddenly discover you love me. Margaret, please." I hung up and turned off my phone completely. That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon I hadn't visited in over a year. I'd always canceled appointments because Daniel or Sarah needed something urgent, or because money I'd set aside for myself became an emergency for them. "Mrs. Thompson," my favorite stylist, Rebecca, called out. "What a surprise! I thought you'd forgotten us." "I didn't forget you, Rebecca. I just forgot that I also deserve to be pampered." I treated myself to the full experience: cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without guilt. While Rebecca worked on my hair, she told me about her life, her children, her dreams. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Daniel and Sarah's needs. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Thompson," she said when finished. "But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen? Yes, Rebecca. I finally learned to say no. When I arrived home that afternoon, there was an unfamiliar car outside. My heart raced. I thought Daniel and Sarah might have returned with reinforcements. But as I got closer, I saw an older woman sitting on my porch steps. Mrs. Thompson? She asked as I stepped out of my car. Yes, that's me. Can I help you? I'm Helen Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but never had a chance to really talk. Yesterday, I heard very loud voices from your house and got worried. Is everything all right? Her sincere concern touched me. Here was a stranger showing more interest in my well-being than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Brooks. I'll make us coffee and I'll tell you a story you won't believe. Over coffee, I told her everything. Helen listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. When I finished, her eyes were filled with tears. Mrs. Thompson, you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I also thought it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also believed she wouldn't love me if I didn't give her money. What happened? I cut off the money when I realized they only called when they needed something. At first, it was terrible. They threatened me, emotionally blackmailed me, tried to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, my daughter called to genuinely apologize. Now we have a real relationship based on love, not money. Her words gave me hope and confirmed I'd made the right decision. Do you think Daniel and Sarah will understand one day? Maybe yes, maybe no, she answered honestly. But that's no longer your responsibility. Mrs. Thompson, your responsibility now is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying about whether Daniel and Sarah had money for rent, food, or their whims. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The next day, Eric and Mr. Chen arrived at 8 in the morning to change the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone rang constantly from unknown numbers, Sarah still trying to contact me from different phones. But I'd developed a new skill, completely ignoring calls that didn't suit me. Mrs. Thompson, Eric said as he installed the cameras, this system will give you absolute peace of mind. You can see from your phone who's coming to your house even when you're away. And if someone breaks in without permission, an alert automatically goes to the police. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son. But it didn't hurt as much as it used to. It was simply a practical measure to maintain my newfound peace. While they worked, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years, call my sister Patricia in Seattle. We'd lost touch because every time we talked, I would brag about Daniel and Sarah, how much money I'd spent on them, how proud I was to help them. I now realized our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news. Margaret? Patricia answered, surprised. Sister, how are you? We haven't spoken in months. I'm good, Patricia. Better than good. I'm calling to tell you I've finally come to my senses. I told her the whole story. The secret wedding, the humiliation, the visit with the lawyer, my decision to cut off funding. Patricia listened in silence. When I finished, her response surprised me. Margaret, sister, it was about time. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something but didn't know how. What did you want to tell me? That Daniel never spoke lovingly about you at family gatherings. It was always my mom helped me with this, or my mom bought me that. Oh no, but never I miss my mom, or I love my mom. It was as if you were a service provider, not a person. Her words hurt, but it was necessary pain. Like when a doctor cleans an infected wound, it hurts, but it's part of healing. You know what else I noticed? Patricia continued. Sarah always spoke about you in the future tense. When Margaret is no longer here, we can remodel her house. Or when we inherit, we'll invest in the business. As if they were waiting for you to die to really start living. This revelation hit like ice water. They didn't just see me as an ATM, they saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and my money. After talking with Patricia, I sat in my kitchen processing this information. Years married to a man who truly loved me. 35 years raising my son alone after my husband's death. And 3 years financing 2 adults who saw me as a $100,000 obstacle. The doorbell rang. On the new cameras, I saw it was Helen with a mug in her hands. I thought you might need some company after everything you told me yesterday, she said with that sincere smile I'd come to appreciate. We sat in my living room, and Helen told me more details from her own experience. My daughter said the exact same things to me that Sarah says to you. You're like a second mom to me. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway. Those are rehearsed phrases. Mrs. Thompson, they learned them from the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. Do you think such a handbook exists? I asked, half joking. Not officially, but everyone seems to read from the same book. Chapter 1, make her feel indispensable. Chapter 2, create constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3, when she resists, question her mental health. We laughed, but it was bitter laughter. It was both funny and tragic to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. Did you ever feel guilty for cutting off the money? I asked. Every single day for the first 3 months, she answered honestly. But then I started seeing results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started looking for extra work. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned I was a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something I'd postponed for years: visit my husband's grave. I'd always made excuses not to go because Daniel or Sarah needed something urgent, or because the taxi fare was better spent on one of their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and beautiful. Richard's grave looked somewhat neglected because I hadn't been there to clean it in months. I sat on the grass beside his headstone and talked to him as if he were alive. Richard, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you left, I put all my energy into Daniel. I wanted to be the best mother in the world, thinking somehow that would compensate for him growing up without a father. But I think in the process, I forgot to be myself. The wind blew gently, and for a moment I felt like he was listening. Our son has become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this and I didn't want to see it. His wife is, well, the money you left for me to live peacefully, I spent it all taking care of them. But not anymore, my love. I've learned. I cleaned his grave, replaced the withered flowers with fresh ones, and stayed another hour simply enjoying the peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't in a hurry to get home and solve a crisis for Daniel and Sarah. When I returned home, there were 3 cars parked outside my door again. My heart raced, but this time I was prepared. The cameras showed Daniel, Sarah, and 2 other people I didn't recognize. Everyone seemed agitated, talking and pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber, they're at my house again. This time they've brought more people. What should I do? Don't get out of the car, Mrs. Thompson. I'll be there right away, and I'm calling the police. After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. They're not allowed on your property. Minutes later, Mr. Weber and 2 police patrol cars arrived. I watched the officers talk to Daniel and Sarah, saw my son gesticulate angrily, saw Sarah crying again, but this time her tears didn't move me. One of the officers approached my car. Ma'am, you can exit safely. Your visitors are leaving immediately. As I stepped out, Daniel shouted from the street, Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son. Daniel, I replied with surprising calm. Family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into people's homes without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs, Sarah screamed from across the street. You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us like this, Mr. Weber interjected. Mrs. Adams, any future communication must go through my office. And I suggest you consult an attorney before making collection threats, because my client has full documentation of all the payments she voluntarily made over 3 years. I watched them drive away in their cars, defeated but not giving up. I knew this wasn't over. But for the first time in this situation, I felt confident. I had professional help. I had emotional support from Helen. And most importantly, I had mental clarity about what was right and wrong. That night, Helen invited me to her house for dinner. I met her daughter, who was visiting, and saw with my own eyes what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully to each other, asked sincerely about each other's lives, laughed together. The daughter didn't ask for money once the entire evening. I wanted that with Daniel too, I confessed to Helen after her daughter had left. And maybe you'll have it one day, she replied. But first he has to learn that you're a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income. For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The next few days were strangely peaceful. The surveillance cameras showed Daniel and Sarah driving past my house several times daily. Sometimes slowly, sometimes they'd park for a few minutes but never get out. It was as if they were studying my routine, looking for the perfect moment for their next move. Mr. Weber had advised me to document every visit, so I kept a detailed log with dates and times. Their persistence will work in our favor, he'd said. Every time they show up after being told not to approach, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order. On Friday morning, while I was peacefully having breakfast, the doorbell rang. The cameras showed a very well-dressed young woman with a folder and a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but something about her posture told me this wasn't a social visit. "Good morning, Mrs. Margaret Thompson," she said as I opened the door. "I'm a social investigator from the Office of Elder Services. We've received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation, and we need to conduct a wellness check." My blood ran cold. Daniel and Sarah had escalated. It was no longer just threats from private lawyers. "Now they'd involve the government? May I see your identification?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Of course." She showed me official ID that looked genuine. "I'm social worker Ms. Rivera. May I come in and speak with you?" I let her in, knowing refusal would have been worse for my case. Ms. Rivera sat in my living room and pulled a form from her folder. "Mrs. Thompson, we've received reports that you've shown significant changes in your financial behavior, that you've cut off communication with your family, and that you've shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told you've refused medical and legal help from your loved ones." Every word had been carefully chosen to make me sound like a mentally disturbed old woman. I recognized Sarah's handiwork in the wording. "Ms. Rivera," I said with all the dignity I could muster, "I'd like to call my attorney before answering any questions." "Ma'am, this isn't a legal interrogation. It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem to speak with me." The phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," infuriated me. It was the same logic abusers use to justify invasions of privacy. "Miss, I'm calling my attorney. You can wait here or come back another day, but I won't answer questions without legal representation present." I called Mr. Weber. He arrived within 20 minutes. When he walked in and saw the social worker, his expression hardened. "Ms. Rivera," he said after checking her ID, "I hope you have a court order to be here, because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." "Sir," Ms. Rivera replied with less confidence, "we have reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our duty to investigate." "What family?" Mr. Weber asked sharply. "The same family that tried to get her to sign a power of attorney without representation? The same family that broke into her house without permission and rifled through her private documents? The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money?" Mr. Weber pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "Here I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. $33,400 withdrawn from her accounts over 3 years. Systematic social exclusion." Retry this response paused because Claude reached its max length for a message. Hit continue to nudge Claude along. "Can't.